On SNG Daily, we'll talk about another $1,000 fine for Donald Trump for contempt of court. But first, news from Israel and the Hamas war. The Israeli military has taken control of the border crossing on the Gaza side in Rafah. Israel started airstrikes on Rafah from Monday after asking an estimated 1 million people taking shelter in Rafah to evacuate and head to Al-Mawasi. Israel says it launched airstrikes on what it called Hamas targets in eastern Rafah. The overnight military operation Israel called a precise counterterrorism operation. Now, Hamas had fired shells on Sunday near the Kerem Shalom crossing, killing at least 3 Israeli soldiers. On Monday, a Hamas official said it had agreed to a 3-stage ceasefire deal, but Israel has rejected it, saying the terms were too soft. President Biden spoke to Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu after the Israeli airstrikes started on Rafah.
I'll reiterate again that we cannot and we will not speak for IDF operations, but we've made clear our views about operations in Rafah that could potentially put more than 1 million innocent people at greater risk. During his call with Prime Minister Netanyahu, the president again made this clear, that we continue to believe that the hostage deal is the best way to avoid that sort of an outcome while securing the release of those hostages. And as I said, those conversations continue.
China now finds itself in a flare-up with another nation. This time, it's Australia. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has called Beijing's behavior unprofessional and unacceptable after the Chinese Air Force dropped flares above and ahead of an Australian MH-60R Seahawk helicopter that was on a routine flight over the Yellow Sea. The military helicopter dodged the flares and no one has been injured in this incident. It was part of an operation to enforce UN sanctions against North Korea. Beijing and Canberra have only just started mending fences after years of strained relations and trade disputes. This is the second incident in just 6 months. In November, Australia accused China of injuring its divers in Japanese waters using an underwater sonar, an accusation China denied.
We have made very strong representations at every level to China about this incident, which we regard as unprofessional and unacceptable. Australian Defence Force personnel were going about their job in international waters, but also in international skies, to support the United Nations in the sanctions that they have against the North Korean regime. That is part of Australia being good global citizens. And Australian Defence Force personnel should not be at risk whilst they're doing that. So we have a very clear position there.
Staying with news from China, Chinese President Xi Jinping and French President Emmanuel Macron called for an Olympic truce, which means a pause in all fighting for the duration of the Paris Olympics, which begin in July. But Xi Jinping wasn't ready to be as accommodating when it came to criticism of Beijing. Xi Jinping said Beijing was being targeted even when it was not at the origin of the Ukraine crisis, nor a party nor participant. The statement seemed aimed at the United States, which believes that China is helping Russia in the war in Ukraine by providing satellite images to the Russian military, besides giving dual-use equipment. Earlier in the day, the president of the European Commission urged President Xi to use all his influence with Russia to end its war in Ukraine. But there was no indication that the Chinese president would be taking any such initiative when he hosts President Putin in Beijing later this month. Donald Trump is guilty of contempt of court again, and he's been fined $1,000 for the 10th such violation. The judge in the hush money trial warned the former US president again that he could send him to jail if he continued to violate the gag order. The judge said Trump's continued willful violations of the gag order amounted to a direct attack on the rule of law. The gag order is in place, so Trump cannot make statements against jurors, witnesses, and their families if it interferes with the case. Trump has claimed that the gag order violates his constitutional right to speak. Donald Trump is seeking another term in office in presidential elections that will be held in November this year.
And then you have the other thing that maybe is even more disgraceful is the gag order, where I have to watch every word I tell you people. You ask me a question, a simple question, I'd like to give it, but I can't talk about it. Because this judge has given me a gag order and said you'll go to jail if you violate it. And frankly, you know what? Our Constitution is much more important than jail. It's not even close. I'll do that sacrifice any day.
Vladimir Putin will take oath of office as Russia's president for another 6-year term. While the United States and 20 European Union nations are boycotting the ceremony, some countries like France, Slovakia and Hungary are expected to send a representative despite appeals from Kyiv. US State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller said, and I quote, "We certainly did not consider that election free and fair, but he is the president of Russia and he is going to continue in that capacity," unquote. Putin won a landslide victory in the elections held in March, just weeks after his most prominent and vocal critic, Alexei Navalny, died in jail. Western governments labelled the re-election as unfair and undemocratic. Russia, meanwhile, has also said it will hold tactical nuclear weapons drills to deter the West, claiming there were threats from France, the United Kingdom and the United States. For more such videos, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make sure you hit the like button and follow for more news updates.